welcome back to Mysteries with Pippa. If this is your first time joining my videos and you love solved mysteries, unsolved mysteries, and just in general mysterious kind of circumstances, then this is the channel for you. And if you feel like you are going to stay for the rest of this video, I would highly recommend that you click the subscribe button and don't forget the ding bell so you do get a notification when I do post. So if you do come back frequently, thank you so much for joining me again today, my loves. And today I'm going to be doing a mini series on killer kids. So every week I will upload a video on kids who have killed. I do not mean any offence to anyone when I call them under the umbrella term killer kids. It is just simpler to use it that way. But anyway, before we begin, I just want to quickly tell you of a huge bargain that I bought. And this bag is incredible. So I've always been used to backpacks just with uni and just storing a shit ton of books, but I've decided to grow up a little bit. I have got the nude pink Ted Baker bag and it is to die for. If you're not interested in fashion, makeup or bags, please skip now. But so the bag came with a nice little mini bag with Ted Baker on, and I basically just store my feminine hygiene products in there and my eye drops that I have to frequently put in. Now I'm not going to talk anymore or bombarding you with any more surprises. Let's get down to the case. So Sharon Carr was born in the former British colony of the British Honduras. It's now known as Belize, and she was born there in 1979. She was born into a very modest, poor family who couldn't afford much, and her father was a drunk alcoholic who was very violent, and so was her mother. So from an early age she grew up around very violent, volatile parents. Sharon was subjected to this violence but also witnessed it against other people on a daily basis. And when Sharon was 7, both her mother and her father were hospitalised due to the sheer violence that they were showing on each other. After a couple of years, Sharon's mother and father both split up, and Sharon's mother met an Englishman and he took Sharon's mother and the family to Surrey in England to have a better life. It would have been a huge opportunity for someone like Sharon and her family to escape poverty, and this is something that Sharon really struggled with to grasp. So because she had moved somewhere where she had nothing to England where there was an opportunity, she really struggled to settle. So when she first started school in the UK, her teachers described her as refreshing and warm and nice and just an all-rounded, really lovely girl who had so much potential. But as she started to get older in the UK, her personality changes. She would frequently become aggressive, just like her mother, and very violent. At the age of 11, on her estate in the UK, she also began smoking cannabis. It is a proven study that the younger you smoke cannabis at, because your brain is still developing, it can lead to psychosis when you're older, such as schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, anxiety. All of that mixture of mental health issues is directly linked to a cannabis intake at a young age. After a couple of years in the UK, Sharon's mother and her new stepfather, the new husband who brought them to the UK, had split up, and it was an event which changed Sharon's life. So the new husband came round to see Sharon's mother and he said, "I want to end it, this relationship isn't good for us." And Sharon's mother, who was a very feisty woman, proceeded to take, she was boiling on the pan, she was boiling fat. I think she used to put it on roast potatoes or something like that. She was boiling fat and she picked up the pan and threw it over her new husband, who suffered significant burns and was in agony for a very long time over this. He described the incident as very horrific in terms of violence, but when he turned around and looked at Sharon, she was calm. She acted like she was watching a cartoon. She wasn't crying, she wasn't worried, she was very calm throughout the whole ordeal of it. And that's when Sharon's Sharon's mother's husband, the new husband who they actually ended up getting a divorce, realised that there was something very wrong with the family. Sharon's mother was also really heavily into voodoo, into the dark magic arts, and she would frequently practice it. So they would practice it by sacrificing animals to a god. They would do it by cutting their own hair or bloodletting themselves or other like animals, and offering it to a god or a dark god. And they would do this in order to, because they believed if they did this, they would gain power over other people. Sharon heavily believed in this because she witnessed her mother do it. So Sharon would also practice it. It started off with little things like, well, I say little, it's actually really big, but the neighbour's cat went missing for a couple of days, and it was later found decapitated in the next door neighbour's back garden, and it was decapitated with a shovel. And this was found later to be Sharon who had done this. But clearly for Sharon, killing animals was not enough for her. Fast forward to 1992, a young 18-year-old girl known as Katey Radcliffe was living nearby in Surrey. She was described as such a bubbly, outgoing girl, so friendly, so helpful to everyone. She was training to be a hairdresser, and she was so career orientated. She was determined to get her own salon and just do well in life. On June the 6th, 1992, Katey and her boyfriend had split up, and she found out that he was dating someone else, and she felt very low and vulnerable, as all 18-year-olds do when they break up with their boyfriend. His friends wanted to cheer her up, and so they all agreed to meet at a nearby club called Ragamuffins to kind of have a good time, let some steam off, and forget the woes of being a teenager, breaking up with someone. In the early hours of the morning, approximately between 12 and 2 a.m, she was walking home after having a really good time at Ragamuffins, but also quite tipsy and a little bit vulnerable because she was feeling hurt from being dumped, and she crossed paths with Sharon Carr. Now, I know you might be thinking, at this time Sharon Carr was 12 years old, what is a 12-year-old girl doing out at between 12 and 2 o'clock in the morning? So Sharon Carr was someone who could not be controlled. She had a huge reputation, a really scary one, and the whole of her town was very scared of her. She had a really scary reputation. Her own mother couldn't control her, who was also very violent herself, and in some ways maybe didn't care. And so out at that time, it was very normal. She could do whatever she wanted. She would skip school. Everything was fine for whatever Sharon wanted to do. It is not clear what happened, but the police have a theory that Sharon Carr was in a car with two males who were older than her, who could drive, and that they were driving around looking for someone. They came across Katey, who wouldn't have felt intimidated because Sharon Carr was obviously very young. She was 12 years old, and they offered her a lift, and they think that Katey got in the car and that she was going to be driven home, but she wasn't. She was instead driven to a abandoned park where she was violently stabbed by Sharon Carr. She was found at 7 a.m. 3 miles away from the club. She was half naked and had been stabbed 27 times all over her body, her breast area, her lungs, her liver, her heart, her genitalia had all had knife-inflicted wounds. They initially thought it was a man between the age of 30 to 50 who had stabbed Katey because of the sheer violence attached to her body, and also the fact that it was targeted at some of her sexual organs. So it was targeted specifically at her genitalia. As we would later find out 4 years later, Sharon's diaries reveal so much kind of lust and love for killing Katey Radcliffe. On the 7th of June 1994, directly 2 years after the murder of Katey Radcliffe, another incident happened. Now, this is no coincidence. I personally believe that she had done this to kind of a ritual repetition. Directly 2 years after the death of Katey, a female pupil was stabbed in the toilets almost fatally. Sharon had lured the girl into the toilets and said that she had dropped a pound coin, which is essentially like $1, and that she needed help finding it. And there was no way that this girl would have turned Sharon down, because she knew the reputation of Sharon and she was very terrified of Sharon, as was the whole school, and so she agreed to help her. When they had gotten into the toilet, she had lured her into a cubicle and proceeded to stab her a bunch of times. Fortunately, Anne did not die, and she later describes the incident as very scary. She says that Sharon had a smile on her face while stabbing her, and that there was a glossy look to her eyes. Sharon Carr was found guilty of 2 counts of ABH, which is actually bodily harm. So there is 2 forms that you can be found guilty of, GBH or ABH. So GBH is grievously bodily harm, where you might beat someone up, but it's not premeditated, it is not planned. Actually, bodily harm is where it is planned and your intention is to potentially murder this person. When she was found guilty, the judge sentenced her to 2 years in a juvenile correction facility, which is essentially a prison but for young adults. At the age of 16, she confided and basically bragged to other inmates that she killed Katey Radcliffe and had got away with it. This had got round the institute, and eventually the officers and the people in charge found out and interrogated Sharon. After being interviewed, Sharon admitted to killing Katey. Sharon's trial was set for March 1997, and the jury had to decide whether she was found guilty of murder or guilty of manslaughter. They brought in the idea of manslaughter because when Katey went to the juvenile, she was assessed by doctors who found that she had been suffering with and also was diagnosed at that time with schizoaffective disorder. For anyone who doesn't know what this is a cocktail of mental illness. So the schizo comes from the idea that she had schizophrenia, so she would have been suffering with delusions, hallucinations, paranoia. But the affective disorder is a mood disorder, so she would have suffered from like a bipolar, so she would have gone from deep depression to high mania, and the mixture of that would have been very, very difficult just to get day by day. They found her guilty of murder and they sentenced her to 14 years in a institutionalized hospital. The judge was so scared that after the 14 years she would be let out, that he said that she would be detained indefinitely no matter the 14 years. So now in 2018 she is still in a hospital correctional centre, and they believe that any psychologist, nurse or doctor looking at her file will never release her due to the way she is. Now there is a huge kind of debate over nature versus nurture. I mean, was she born like this? And a lot of people do not believe she was born like this, because many people have the upbringing or even worse upbringing that she has and do not go on to commit crimes. A lot of people have schizoaffective disorder and do not go on to murder people. But I do believe it is a little bit of both. I do believe it is the cocktail of her abusive mother and father, genetics, environmental kind of situations such as smoking cannabis and getting away with things, that all added up to her doing what she did at the age of 12. This girl had no hope in the environment she was born into and the uncontrollable mental illnesses that she had. She was on a path to disaster and nothing was going to stop that, which is very tragic in itself. I'd love to know if you guys have any theories, whether you think it was strictly nature or nurture. I also really feel for the family of Katey Radcliffe. In all the years since she has been murdered, not one of her family or friends will speak out to reporters or news press. They don't want any money. They still very much are still at loss with the murder of their beloved friend, relative, daughter, granddaughter, and the only person who's ever spoke out about Katey is her former boss at Hairdresser, who only describes her as family, not a work colleague, and how they always still think of her now many years later, and they smile at the really amazing memories. So I'm sorry to end it like here on such a bad and awful note, and even though we know who done it. So usually with my videos we don't get that closure because we don't know who's committed a murder, an unsolved mystery. I still feel like there is no closure because she's gone, and it is really, really sad. So I would love your thoughts and opinions on this case, especially because it is such a complicated case. For a 12-year-old to murder an 18-year-old, physically it must have been very draining, but she loved it, and she did describe, Sharon did describe as being sexually turned on by this, which is very, very horrifying. So thank you so much if you've made it this far for watching the end of my video. In case you wanted to know, this is a Yankee Candle. It is turquoise sky, so it smells like sea salt. It smells like the beach, it smells very lovely. And up here I will have burning. Please do be careful. I always get black splashes from the smoke when I have it too close to my wall. I really need to get it painted over. That one that's burning there is the perfume Ghost in a wax melt. It's really nice. And I have my Beauty and the Beast rose that my boyfriend got me for Christmas, which I adore. So yes, please do like, rate, subscribe. Give me some feedback, guys. Also, don't forget to follow me on Instagram, Mysteries with Pippa. I will be setting up a Snapchat and a Facebook, but only if it picks off, because it's not really picked off right now, but I don't really mind because I really enjoy doing this. And I will see you next week for another case.